In November 2014, an unsigned, anonymous letter was sent to the Birmingham City Council alleging that hardline Muslims were trying to infiltrate inner city schools to implement an Islamist agenda. This was later referred to as Operation Trojan Horse. Although most people consider the letter as a hoax, nonetheless it precipitated snap OfSted inspections of 20 inner city schools, including the alleged mastermind of this Islamic takeover, Parkview Educational Trust, now known as Rockwood Academy. Previously rated in 2012 as outstanding, suddenly Ofsted rated Parkview, along with other schools, as inadequate, placing them in special measures. The school governors at the time called it a witch hunt. Almost 4 years on, I want to know what were the facts and what were fiction, from the horse's mouth himself. Welcome to the show, Tahir Alam.
Nice to be on.
Pleasure having you. So, is there such a thing as a Sharia-compliant state school?
Within the English education system, you've got 1/3 of schools are faith schools, and there's no category called secular schools, because even your maintained schools, what normally may be referred to as kind of secular schools, if you like, they have aspects of religion in them. For example, the teaching of Ari, and also the act of collective worship, daily act of collective worship is statutory. I mean, the suggestion here, Adil, is that perhaps we were kind of imposing certain things on children, is the accusation. It's not the fact that we were accommodating. Was there any imposition? Well, from 600 children, only about 50 normally on a regular basis, came. It varied really from 30 to 50 to 60, 70, it varied throughout the year. Came for the Friday prayers and came to do the Zohar prayers as well. What that tells us is that it was purely optional. There wasn't a single accommodation, if you like, that was requested by parents or by pupils that was compulsory, not one, nor was fasting.
Aren't you kind of opening the floodgates, if you like, for there to be kind of a chaotic situation where many of the state schools will then have to accommodate for so many minority needs, just for example, holidays?
Well, they are trying to do that already. That's
for holidays,
that's not a new situation. For example, the holidays do that already. When there is, for example, Diwali and so on, teachers who are of that background, for example, and those events are celebrated. What kind of society are we trying to create? Are we trying to create Stalin's Russia? Are we, where we got one formula being peddled through in one type of school? We live in a diverse society, and our education system needs to be reflective of and responsive to the diversity that is real on the ground.
But the vision that you're kind of peddling, if you like, it seems articulating. It seems very utopic. It's like this very ideal vision of all these different minorities.
Well, let's create a discriminatory society then, where minorities would be oppressed, and where we have one formula and one type of school.
Don't you think it's important to acknowledge there is a dominant culture? The dominant culture, meaning if you want a lot of the faith or particulars of faith to be accommodated for, then why not just open or be in a faith school?
Well, people are opening faith schools. But as far as my view is concerned, Muslim children, 95% of them happen to go to state schools. That's just a reality.
Yes.
To say that, they should open a faith school is just a cop-out.
Now we have this book here, which you co-authored back in 2007, Meeting the Needs of Muslim Pupils in State Schools. That's right, yeah. So Tahir, why did you write this book?
Yeah, I wrote this book in response to a variety of queries that I was receiving when I was a chair at the Muslim Council of Britain. So we always received inquiries from local authorities, from parents, and from teachers as well, who wanted to know, what was Islamic, if you like, and how should they meet the needs of their Muslim pupils.
So could it be argued that accommodating for minority needs, like Tahir attempted to do, does in fact promote British values rather than undermine them? Okay, so the allegations have been dropped against the teachers, the 5 teachers.
All the teachers, yeah.
All the teachers. However, your particular case is still ongoing.
Yeah. With respect to the teachers, the accusations that were made against the leadership team, if you like, and myself are the same. Yeah. I was supposed to be kind of I'm accused of being accommodating certain things, and they were supposed to be doing those things, if you like. Now, those cases collapsed because the Department of Education and the NCT are lawyers, really. They failed to disclose critical bits of information. They're only releasing what is favorable to them. And in the tribunal case, of course, what they found was that the panel had been deliberately misled. And it is for this reason that all the cases actually collapsed against the teachers. So I am now the sole conspirator. So I've been conspiring with myself, it's an oxymoron now. I've been conspiring with myself now to take over these schools and to Islamize them and do all the things that I was accused of. The reality to that is far from it, to be honest. They don't want to release the entire transcripts of it.
Okay, even though it was a public hearing.
It was a public hearing, but they don't want to release the transcripts of it, is what they are saying. From my point of view, I have no problem with the transcript being released, and they can release them.
Yeah.
Because I think that the reason why they are doing this, I say it quite frankly,
yes,
and unapologetically, the reason why they're doing that is because they want to maintain the facade that there was something dark happened here, that something sinister happened here, and we need to protect the identity of people because they might be a risk to them, and they want to maintain this falsehood that there was that kind of atmosphere, created and so on. So we know this now.
Under the pretext of protecting identities
and so on, yeah.
The turn of events were quite dramatic. I mean, the DFE, the Department for Education, actually appointed the ex-head of counter-terrorism, Peter Clark, to investigate about the Trojan Horse Affair. And even the West Midlands Police at the time, in fact, criticised that appointment. What kind of impact do you think that had on the children at the school and the parents?
I mean, there are a number of investigations. I think from the point, the entire offensive was planned at least sort of 3-4 weeks before, but Clark's report was one of them, the OfSted inspections were another one, the Education Funding Agency investigations were another one, PwC investigation was another one, so we are the most investigated school in the history of this country. No end of investigations really, but obviously the impact, was that these schools have now been failed, and I think that's the important thing. This particular intervention destroyed those opportunities. It actually traumatized the children and labeled them as potential extremists, if you like. The lasting legacy of this intervention has been the destruction of these children, the opportunities these children would have had. They've been destroyed. So, for example, our schools was consistently achieving 70 plus results in A stars to C, including English and Maths, which is the main benchmark. Now the results are in the 40s. So 2016 result, for example, was 41%. I mean, the accusations against the teachers were of a similar nature to myself. The accusations, in fact, are pretty identical.
Okay.
That, you were promoting too much religion in school and those kind of things. And we were inspected, long before this, of course. Nobody raised any objections to any of the practices that we were doing, whether it was the azan, whether it was the, Islamic collective worship or prayer accommodation. These things in all the previous reports to the following the Trojan Horse interventions, all the previous reports praised this practice as being exemplary in reflecting the aspirations of the children and of the parents that the school actually serves.
Multicultural Britain.
Multicultural Britain is a reality, and those who are driving for monoculturalism are living in clad cuckoo land, and they are promoting division and hatred.
When Michael Wilshaw came to visit the school in 2012, he said that all schools need to be like this. Yes,
he regarded it to be an exemplary school, from being an outstanding school with 13 exemplaries in the report. We were suddenly, all of a sudden, we were in special measures and we were completely failing school. We didn't change anything in the school, but the judgment changed somehow. These inspections, I've always argued from the outset, were part, not inspections actually, they were inquisitions, and they were part of a witch hunt. And of course now the school is inadequate. Now, does that make sense to anyone? Where are the schools now?
Yes,
compared to where they were before? So we are now, good 3-4 years down the line, if you like. Academic results we've just mentioned anyway.
They're worse.
They're a lot worse, yeah. So they are now failing schools effectively from that point of view. What about Ofsted inspections then? So when our schools were inspected in 2014, they were put into special measures by Ofsted. So it's very interesting to compare the trajectory of the Ofsted Ofsted inspection grading, as the schools have gone from 75% to 41%. The gradings by Ofsted have gone in the opposite direction.
Okay.
So the gradings were, so when the results were 75%, the school was inadequate. And now that the school results are 41% in 2016, Ofsted came in 2016 and they graded the school as being good overall.
A good school.
It's now a good school. I don't know what they're doing to measure the
Because Tahir Alam's not there.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So if the objective was
as
maybe...
you're not there, it's going to be a good school now, right?
That's right, yeah.
Everyone's safe.
It seems to be that's the criteria for Ofsted. I mean, it really is, I mean, we are laughing really, but it's not funny for our children because they're going to fail for decades to come. The stage is now, the legacy of Trojan Horse is that our children will continue to fail in these schools for decades to come. And the climate that has been created means that the parents will not be able to challenge. Otherwise, they'll be accused of being, a radical or an extremist or being aggressive and so on. But what's more disturbing than all of this is that the Department for Education and Ofsted, they want to project this image that their interventions have improved the schools. I mean, they are now in the business of, what they are in the business of really is promoting the falsehood that they have improved the schools.
Yes.
They want to maintain the lie, if you like. The fact of the matter is completely opposite. The parents know that, but the image is kept. There are three people who are trustees of Parkview Education. Well, Parkview Education Trust was the old name, now called Co-Education Trust. And one would think that in a school which is 95% Muslim children, one would think that you'd have at least maybe one, if not two people from those communities reflecting the democratic spirit, that there should be some involvement. Well, not one person is from the community that the school serves.
Right.
That says something very important about the intervention into our schools and what motivated it. What motivated it, to be quite frank with you, was a fusion really of racism and Islamophobia is what actually launched these investigations into our schools and the subsequent, witch hunt.
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you. Do you believe, in a nutshell, all of this was due to the institutional racism that has been sanctioned by, many would argue, Michael Gove himself? So, do you think he's responsible for a lot of what's happened? His Islamophobic views are very clear, and I think that the Trojan Horse letter landing on his desk, what was an anonymous letter, undated, unsigned, unsubstantiated, he took it to heart, if you like, and instigated, a raft of activity as a minister, and abused his power in targeting, our schools and seeking the removal of, people like myself and other people who were involved within those schools as well. And that was orchestrated, planned right from the outset, although none of that has been disclosed in any of the legal cases, and the Department of Education refuses to do so. Could you argue that maybe the whole episode of this Trojan Horse affair in itself was, quite ironically, a reverse Trojan Horse?
Oh, it certainly was. If there was a Trojan Horse, and the Trojan Horse project was being triggered by the Department of Education, from anywhere, really, because the disclosures are very, very important.
So this is a conspiracy?
Well, whether it's a conspiracy or not, but I think people exploited an opportunity that was provided. I wouldn't say it's a conspiracy in a government level or anything, but I think an opportunity was taken advantage of.
Well, the government was
by
involved. The government was heavily involved.
They were, but I think...
you were spearheaded by the government, the majority of the inquiries.
Yeah, I think people took advantage of things, is the way I would put it, rather than a conspiracy, if you like, right across the board. I think an opportunity arose and people got together. And the outcome was already decided, from their point of view. So it's got nothing to do with fair inspections or anything. Now we know this now because of the article that was published a few months ago, which I didn't know before, that Sir Michael Wilshaw, who was the Ofsted chief at the time, who was spearheading all of this, he was going around with the security guards to protect him, because he felt that he was physically in danger from the people who were running these schools. Now, how can any inspection be fair when the chief of OfSted actually has got security people around him to protect him, from supposedly people who are involved in the Trojan Horse plot? I mean, this kind of paranoia is just quite frankly, it's just incredible. It's absolutely laughable that this man was going around with security guards because he felt there was a threat to his physical well-being or his life. And at the same time, OfSted are claiming, in my legal case, that that there was no political interference in the arrangements, there was no political pressure, but their own chief is going around with security guards at the height of the Trojan Horse.
What message has this whole saga sent out to the Muslim community, do you think, in Birmingham?
It is not just in Birmingham, but it's across the country, really, isn't it? And it has sent a message which really, if you're a Muslim, you need to be very careful, because you've been stigmatized. If Muslim parents want to become governors, they are double checked as to how religious they are. And Muslim teachers are also in a similar kind of situation. And Muslim children, for example, we know under the Prevent program in particular, that they are under surveillance, they're under monitoring.
Would you say that the Prevent strategy was in fact saved, and given the resurgence that it needed by this whole Trojan Horse affair?
I think it certainly was used by the government to statutorize Prevent. Don't forget, before Trojan Horse, Prevent was not statutory, it was voluntary.
Since Trojan Horse, we have
it's been made statutory.
We've had university lecturers complaining as well, talking
That's right.
about how they literally want us to spy on Muslim students, right, across the board, and it's
and the teachers are required to do exactly the same. And if they fail to do so, they could be disciplined and could even be sacked, you see, potentially. The teacher-pupil relationship is one of trust. It's very important for the pupil to be able to say what they want to say.
Yes.
Because openness in education is very important, and prevent culture of surveillance, of spying, of threats, of intimidation, actually of referrals. Parents
Yes.
have been threatened with referrals, and so on. That kind of culture does not create an open society.
So would you say the Muslims now are guilty until proven innocent?
Well, there isn't. I think there's
an element of that.
There is a strong element of that.
Yeah.
And we had a very interesting case in London as well, which is that a teacher asked. This was covered in the press as well. A teacher asked the pupils about some events and things, and there was an terrorist event in London, and all the children were predominantly Muslim in the class. Not one of them mentioned that particular event. So she asked some of the children afterwards. She said, "Well, that was the main event. How come nobody talked about it?" Then some of the children disclosed that their parents told them not to speak about religion in school, in case somebody picks up a thread.
Tahir Alam, in retrospect now, 3 years or so after the whole Trojan Horse affair, what would you have done differently?
As far as the accommodating the needs of Muslim children is concerned, and the other allegations are concerned, I would have not done anything differently as far as the school policies are concerned. I would have done absolutely nothing different. In fact, I'm very proud of what we've achieved for our children. From a political point of view, as far as the interventions are concerned, I mean, in any school there's room for improvement. Don't forget, I'm not talking about improvement here. In any school there's room for improvement. In fact, the fact that you think there is a room for improvement is part of excellence.
So Tahir, how has this whole affair and fiasco affected your personal life?
I mean, it's affected myself, and it's affected all of the teachers who worked in the school as well and were associated with the school. I think reputations have been damaged, and a caricaturial image has been, projected, if you like, in the public domain, which is completely false and doesn't reflect the reality for myself or even other people in that sense. But the impact of it has been that since me leaving the school, I was subsequently given a prohibition order preventing me from working in schools, from running schools, leading schools, and even being a governor in a school, or even volunteering in a school. Obviously, as an education professional, going back for experience of 20 years of cross-education and experience, that means that, I can no longer do what I really love and what I loved.
After speaking to Tahir, I sense a strong feeling of injustice that he's had to endure. I mean, here's a person who's had his 20+ year career put to an end. He's not allowed to step foot in a school or a classroom or have anything to do with school leadership. Now, after the other heads and teachers have had their cases dropped and been vindicated, he still seems to be in the middle of it all. I want to speak to former Lib Dem MP John Hemming, who recently criticised the tribunal's decision not to share details of Tahir's hearing as concerning. In a recent article I read regarding the tribunal's decision not to publish details of the hearing regarding Tahir Alam and the so-called Trojan Horse Affair, you mentioned how can judges oversee a public hearing but not make their ruling public?
Yeah, I think the point about the judicial process is that judges obviously should not be controlled by politicians. That's the idea of the separation of the estates of the Constitution. So the judges go off and do their thing. But a very important part of the judicial process is public accountability, and that judges, people making decisions, who are given the job to make decisions about things, are required to tell people why the decision is that they've taken. So what is the basis of the decision?
We understand, for example, that in 2012 Parkview Educational Trust was given an outstanding inspection from OfSted.
Yeah.
And then after this whole
Well,
fiasco
then they changed
happened,
the rules, didn't they?
Yes.
They changed the rules to fail.
Inadequate.
I have never really been a great fan of the way in which Ofsted monitors children's services more generally. It's not just schools, but also wider children's services. I've not been a great fan of it. I don't think the methodology is that good. And in a situation like this, where they suddenly say, part the way through, we're going to change all the rules and we'll do it a completely different way, I don't think that's good. And then when you have this sort of trying to be secretive about it all as well, that's not good. Because at the end of the day, as I said, come back to accountability. Ofsted are a public body. They operate sort of in the judicial estate of the Constitution. And you need to see what's actually going on. I had a big battle with Ofsted over a period of about 2 or 3 years, trying to find out about how many children had died in the country from suspected child abuse and neglect, and they didn't want to tell me.
Right.
And that's a very important issue, of course. And they were very, very resistant, and I used parliamentary proceedings in the end to drag it out of them.
But I mean, we speak about the examples of extremism and murder and a very monolithic way of living. But in reality, there was no extremism that was actually found, because we know of the almost 15 or so teachers and the 5 heads last year were, well, if you like, their cases were dropped.
Yeah, no, the point about it, it wasn't about that sort of... The extremism that happened on the streets of the small heath was an elderly gentleman being murdered by somebody because of his religion. That he happened to be a Muslim, happened to be murdered by a Ukrainian. I was impressed by the police in finding out that who actually murdered him, which was given it a relatively recent migrant from Ukraine.
Murdered Mohammed Salim.
That's right, yes. Yes. I think he was in his 70s or something like that. He was just killed because of his religion. And obviously, there we have an example of an extremist.
So what do you personally think about Tahir Alam? Is he a community and educational success story in terms of the results that he actually
Well, obviously
achieved?
results, what can be said about what was going on in the schools is the schools were doing better in terms of getting better results.
76% 5,
exactly.
8
So, you know, what you can say is they were making progress.
But do you think Tahir, in a way, was also a political target, the way this whole situation was politicized?
Well, it was a simple argument. Basically, they saw a simple argument. Simple argument wasn't actually true, but they saw a simple argument and they went for that particular simple argument. And I thought...
Which is?
Well, there was this pointing the finger of extremism, which wasn't there.
So is this the legacy that the Trojan Horse Affair has left behind? Even the current head of Ofsted, Amanda Spielman, speaks of a muscular liberalism in implementing British values. She even supports the banning of the hijab at a Newham primary school, which is also Muslim majority and rated outstanding, even though the head herself reversed the decision and apologised? Is this the type of relationship the DFE and OfSted will continue to have now with Muslim parents and pupils? Thanks for watching this episode, and stay tuned for much more only on CloseShave TV.